A wealthy heiress invites her maid son to play chess as a joke. She didn't know he was a child genius. Come here, boy. How about showing me how you play chess in the slums? Mrs. Eleanor Harrington's voice cut through the laughter of the evening like a sharp blade, ringing with that unmistakable tone of superiority that she carried into every conversation. Her Manhattan penthouse was lit like a palace that night, the crystal chandeliers showering golden light across polished marble floors, velvet couches, and oil paintings of ancestors who had never lifted a finger for honest work. It was the kind of setting where power didn't just gather, it strutted. And in that room, Eleanor Harrington ruled like a queen. Julian Rivera, 17 years old, stood silently near the long oak table where silver trays of hors d'oeuvres glittered under candlelight. He was dressed in his plain black server's uniform, borrowed shoes slightly too large for his feet, but his posture carried something that no suit could give, a quiet, unshakable dignity. His mother, Marisol, moved swiftly beside him, balancing a tray of champagne flutes with the practiced grace of 20 years of servitude. The charity dinner that evening was Eleanor's invention, a dazzling event meant to showcase her generosity toward underprivileged youth. Yet the irony was cruel. One such youth, standing right in her living room, wasn't being celebrated, he was being mocked. I bet he can at least move the pieces, Eleanor continued, her manicured finger pointing lazily at the Italian marble chessboard on the coffee table. It was more decoration than game piece in her home, an ornament that whispered wealth to anyone who saw it. It'll be fun to see what this boy can do against someone who's actually studied the game. Guests chuckled, trying not to spill their champagne. Men in tailored suits leaned toward their wives, whispering jokes, while jeweled women covered their lips with gloved hands to hide their amusement. One voice rose above the murmurs. Mr. Prescott, owner of 3 luxury hotel chains, muttered smugly, "I bet he doesn't even know the night moves in an L shape." More laughter followed, shallow and cruel. Marisol's knuckles whitened around the tray she held. For 20 years she had scrubbed the Harringtons' bathrooms, polished their silver, ironed their clothes. She had endured disrespect, survived on scraps of kindness, and poured every cent she could spare into raising her boy. And now, standing just a few feet from her, Eleanor used Julian as a punchline for her friends. Marisol lowered her eyes, not from shame, but from the fear that if she looked too long at her son's face, she would see the hurt she could not bear. "Marisol," Eleanor called out sweetly, her words dripping with false kindness, "you may stop serving for a while. I want you to watch your son play. It will be educational for both of you." The room chuckled again, but this time Julian did not move immediately. He stood still, dark eyes steady, scanning the faces before him. He saw not individuals, but a wall of arrogance, each smirk and sideways glance another stone stacked high. At 17, Julian had already learned something most adults never do, that silence speaks volumes. And in that silence, he could hear every single person in the room doubting him. But what none of them knew, not even his mother fully, was that Julian Rivera was no ordinary boy. Of course, "Mrs. Harrington," Julian said finally, his voice calm, almost gentle, "it will be my pleasure." Some of the guests exchanged puzzled glances. The boy's composure was unexpected. Eleanor, delighted at her own performance, reclined in a leather armchair as if she were royalty presiding over a tournament. "Excellent. I always enjoy a good laugh." She gestured at the board with mock ceremony. "I bet you've never played on something like this. Genuine Italian marble, each piece worth more than most people's yearly salary." From the corner, State Representative Lydia Monroe spoke up, her brow furrowed. "Eleanor, don't you think this is a bit cruel? The poor boy is going to be humiliated in front of everyone." Eleanor waved her hand dismissively, diamonds glittering. "Nonsense, Lydia. It's an opportunity for him. He'll be able to tell his little friends that he played a real match in a real Manhattan mansion." The guests chuckled again, but a few eyes shifted toward Julian. There was something unnerving about the way he approached the board. He did not stumble or hesitate, nor did he fumble with the pieces. His hands moved with deliberate precision, as though he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. What Eleanor did not know, what she could never have imagined, was that this boy she dismissed as a servant had been sharpening his mind for nearly a decade. While other children played video games or wasted afternoons wandering the streets, Julian had been buried in books. At the local library, he devoured every chess manual he could find: Capablanca's Fundamentals, Fisher's My 60 Memorable Games, Kasparov's Analysis of Battles Past. At home, on a second-hand computer he had coaxed back to life with scavenged parts, he watched recordings of Grandmaster tournaments until his eyes burned. He memorized more than 200 openings, cataloged 50 famous defenses, and replayed championship matches in his mind until the patterns became second nature. And while Eleanor's life was one of indulgence, Julian's was built on sacrifice. His mother worked late shifts cleaning apartments in Brooklyn, often returning home after midnight, exhausted. But every night she found her son awake at the kitchen table, a chessboard spread before him, his brow furrowed in thought. "You should sleep, mijo," she would whisper, and he would smile faintly and reply, "Just one more game, Mama." Now, in the glittering penthouse, all those silent years were about to speak for him. Eleanor took her seat on the white side of the board, brimming with confidence. "I always play white, dear. It's a family tradition," she said, as though it were a rule of the universe. Julian nodded without comment, aligning his black pieces perfectly in the center of each square. Mr. Prescott noticed and frowned slightly. That was not the behavior of someone unfamiliar with the game. "Let's make this fun," Eleanor declared. "If the boy manages to give me even one scare, I'll donate $1,000 to, oh, I don't know, some public school." Laughter rippled through the room once again, but this time Julian's lips curled into a faint smile, a smile that held no humor, only certainty. Marisol's breath caught. She knew that smile. It was the one Julian wore at 12 when a teacher told him a math problem was too hard, and he solved it in minutes. It was the smile he carried when he returned home from a local tournament with a trophy nearly half his size. It was the smile of quiet victory, of battles already won in the mind. Eleanor, oblivious, opened with pawn to e4. "King's pawn opening," she announced condescendingly, her voice dripping with false instruction. "A classic move we learned at Yale." Without hesitation, Julian answered, "Pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense." The air shifted. Whispers rippled among the guests. That was no beginner's move. It was the mark of someone who had studied theory, someone prepared for battle. Representative Monroe leaned forward, eyes narrowing in interest. "That's impressive," she murmured. Eleanor hesitated. 3 seconds too long. Julian had already read her like a book. She played knight to f3, following the only pattern she half remembered from club games. Julian's response came instantly, his fingers barely grazing the piece before it landed with a decisive click. And so the match began. With each passing move, the mood in the room shifted like sand beneath the tide. At first, the laughter lingered, guests trading snide comments. But by the 10th move, their tones grew hushed. By the 15th, silence stretched long between Eleanor's turns. Beads of sweat glistened on her forehead, betraying her unease. Julian, by contrast, looked almost serene. His hands moved with grace, his eyes never wandering from the board. He wasn't simply playing Eleanor. He was dismantling her pride piece by piece while her friends bore witness. He sacrificed pawns to lure her queen into traps, built invisible walls of defense that she blundered against again and again. The more she struggled, the clearer it became. She was outmatched in every possible way. Around them, the guests shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Prescott loosened his tie. A senator's wife sipped her champagne nervously, her eyes darting between the board and Eleanor's paling face. Even Lydia Monroe, the only one who had objected at the start, now watched Julian with a faint smile of admiration. Finally, after nearly an hour of quiet devastation, Julian's rook slid into place with a soft, final thud. "Checkmate," he said, his voice calm, steady, and merciless. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor Harrington, who had mocked him, who had expected a spectacle of humiliation, sat frozen. Her queen lay cornered, her king trapped, her pride shattered. She tried to speak, but no words came. Marisol's eyes welled with tears. For once, they were not tears of exhaustion or despair, but of pride. Her son, the boy she had raised in hardship, had just conquered a room full of people who thought themselves untouchable. Julian rose quietly, smoothing his uniform. His gaze swept across the room, meeting every pair of eyes. "Thank you for the game, Mrs. Harrington," he said politely. But his tone carried a weight that none could ignore. It was the weight of truth. Genius knows no class, no wealth, no privilege. That night marked the beginning of a transformation. Whispers of Julian Rivera spread through Manhattan like wildfire. A scholarship to Columbia University followed, tournaments, trophies, and eventually recognition that could never be ignored. For Eleanor, however, the memory of that evening lingered like a scar. She had meant to use him for entertainment, but instead she had become the spectacle. Her arrogance had blinded her, and in front of her powerful circle, it had cost her the one thing she valued most: control. And for everyone present, the lesson was clear. Never underestimate the quiet ones, for behind silence may lie brilliance strong enough to humble even the proudest. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Because sometimes, the most powerful victories happen not on battlefields or in boardrooms, but across a simple chessboard, where the mind proves stronger than money, and where respect is won not by birth but by brilliance.